I thought this small bouquet of lily of the valley flowers made a nice drawing. And I thought with all those little flowers, it would give me a good chance to explore drawing the effect of the massive small round flowers rather than trying to draw them all exactly. And there are lovely contrasts with the fairly flat, broad, almost sculptural leaves. However, at some point in the drawing, I was so unhappy with how it was looking that I decided that it really wasn't worth continuing, that I didn't want to make a video out of it because I didn't think what the actual finished drawing was going to say was worth listening to. However, at that point, it suddenly occurred to me that rather than putting it to one side and finding something else to draw, I could actually just experiment with the hatching, which was where I'd come to grief, experiment with it and just go for broke. That I had absolutely nothing to lose. I had the drawing outlined. I had a lot of the detail done. It was really creating the effect that I wanted with the values and the darknesses and with the leaves. And I thought, well, I can just be really bold now in exploring the possibilities. Now, it wasn't going to be as good as if I was starting from scratch being bold, because I'd already put quite a lot of value, I thought, in rather unhelpful ways onto the leaves. And that couldn't be undone, clearly, drawing directly in ink. But I often talk about in videos that when we make mistakes or do things that we end up wishing we hadn't done, that part of the challenge and the opportunity that gives us is to try and hide it, try and disguise it, that there are often ways that go beyond what we think is possible at the point where we've made the mistake or we're unhappy with how the drawing is looking. Now, at this stage, you'll see that what I focused on is creating the bunches of flowers, and I'm particularly trying to pay attention to the way the flowers hang from the very small and slender stalks, because that's part of the characteristic visual effect of lily of the valley flowers. But I don't want to get bogged down drawing them, a lot of them, very precisely. And I mostly just do a bit of a almost circle. And a lot of the silhouettes will be established by the darker values around them. And so now I'm trying to do the leaves. I haven't done these leaves as successfully as I would have liked. I haven't kept the proportions and the relative sizes as precise as I would have liked. One important thing when we have a posy or a bunch similar to this that's approximately symmetrical and balanced in how it looks is to get that same effect. That if we have a ring of leaves, foliage around the outside of the flowers that roughly comes up to the same height on left and right, we want to make sure that we draw our leaves so that they come up about the same. We don't want to find that the leaves on the left side of the floral display are noticeably smaller than the leaves on the right side. At this point though, I'm still basically outlining, because this is a subject with the leaves that I think lends itself to creating an outline and then bringing the effect that we want, the overall effect we want through hatching. Now at this stage, I'm thinking that I'm just going to put hatching on the leaves for some of the darker areas of shade and shadow. I'm planning that a lot of the leaves will actually just be left white. So that was my intention when I started. And at this stage, it's still my intention. And I'm just now looking to try and balance what's happening. I've got the throat of the jar. Again, it's important to line up any receptacle, whether it's a jar or a vase, that flowers are in carefully, so that again, the flowers look as though they're sitting, that they're balanced in that container. So now I start doing the values. Now, part of my problem was that I really just had trouble summoning the attention, the concentration to really choose the best direction on each leaf to do these hatching lines, or at least the initial hatching lines. And that meant that the more I did them, the more I was ending up thinking that the hatching didn't help us to understand the underlying form, and sometimes, in fact, it did the exact opposite, obscured what was happening topographically. And I also discovered that my leaves weren't as accurate as I was wanting them to be, as I thought they were when I drew them. As I start to do the hatching, I realised that a lot of the angles aren't the same, and it wasn't an improvement. And so now I really just start making lots of hatch marks, trying to define some of the flowers, because that's visually going to be the key part of this drawing, I think. Those flowers that are down in the throat of the posy, the bouquet, where we have a lot of darkness around. And even though those flowers are somewhat in shade, that's going to be the key place for us, I think, to see, and if we know something about flowers, identify the shape and therefore the type of flowers these are. So I'm feeling the pressure of not being happy with the drawing, but hoping that maybe when I get a bit more done, it will somehow magically improve. The problem is I'm not really changing what I'm doing. So the more I do, particularly the leaves, the more unhappy I'm becoming and the more frustrated I'm becoming. But at this point, I'm still trying to continue this drawing as I originally envisaged it. This is a 0.2 millimeter Copic multi-liner pen. So while it's a nice, relatively small, fine line for doing the detail, doing the flowers, and even the leaves on this size drawing, because it's a relatively small drawing, it's rather a thin line for the hatching that I'm wanting to do. And so now I'm really just trying to get a bit of paper covered. So I'm moving with my hand faster than I'm thinking with my mind. And now I'm really just flinging hatching marks on leaves. And then when I look at my reference thinking, oh gee, that doesn't really help, and then add in darker ones somewhere else, I'm getting close to the stage where I'm thinking this really isn't worth continuing. I'll tell you at that moment. I've marked it in this video that I'm editing, the spot where I actually stopped for a little bit and was going to find something else to do. And then I realized, no, look, why don't I just try and be really bold with it, just really go for broke and see what happens and turn it into a learning experience for me. And while I knew it wasn't going to end up without issues, because I couldn't cover everything, hopefully I would be able to improve what was happening. So adding some background contrast, there is a leaf at the back there which brings some of those further back flowers into greater clarity. And now just feeling a bit overwhelmed with these leaves, doing the leaves one by one. And this is the point now, this is the point where I had a larger gap than what the video would suggest. And I'm thinking, look, I'm just going to go for broke. I'm going to hugely increase my hatching on all the leaves, and the relative values in many parts make the darker bits darker again and the lighter bits darker, and just see whether that brings a coherence visually to it that it doesn't have at the moment. And I do hatching marks that go over half the bouquet, half the leaves. I do really broad marks that don't even try to be attached to any one leaf. And I decided to add a bit more leaf there just for balance, for visual balance with the right hand side. And so here I go. I'm still trying to make sure that I keep clarity, that we can still see individual leaves, but I'm greatly increasing just the more generalized midtones by hatching across a number of leaves at once, rather than trying to do it leaf by leaf, which was the process I was starting with. And we'll just see how it turns out at the end. Whoever we are, however much drawing we have or haven't done, we're always on a learning path, and it's always good to experiment. And when we have a drawing that, as far as we can see, we've wrecked, then even if parts of it clearly cannot be improved upon, if there are parts that we can perhaps explore something with greater boldness that we normally would try, whether it's with hatching or whether it's with just value through ink or through colour, then why not? Why not make this a learning lesson? Because if we're learning to draw, then all of our drawings are drawing practice exercises. The purpose of them all is to learn and to improve in our drawing. We're not thinking artworks, we're thinking of learning a skill and experimenting, breaking perhaps through an approach, a technique that we normally use, and explore something different can be a very helpful part of that learning experience, that learning process. And so I've increased the value of all the leaves, still trying to have enough variation that it's not one unrecognizable darkness. And now I'm getting towards the end. I'm looking to see what I've done and just trying to add a little more differentiation in some of the parts between the values. Looking at it now, particularly at a much smaller scale, there are some additional parts I wish I'd paid a little more attention to. What do you think? G'day, I'm Stephen Travers. Well, a bit of a surprise. I thought this was going to be a drawing that I abandoned and a video that I wouldn't make, but in the end I suddenly realised this is an opportunity to experiment and to try something different from what I planned. And while I still have issues with the drawing, it's certainly, in my mind, improved from where I thought it was when I was going to give up. So if you have drawing disasters where you're tempted to give up, before you trash it, why not think, well, is there something I can just do to keep learning? A way I can experiment, try something bold, try something different, and turn it into a learning experience. But hey, whatever you draw, however it turns out, whatever you end up doing with it, make sure you had fun. I finished up enjoying this a lot more than I thought I was going to. See you next video. Bye.